Hi all, this is Antti and I'm going to show you how to use the new Big Bang application. So the first time you launch the app, this is what you're going to see. The simulation starts immediately and patterns start emerging from the simulation rules and seed. And if I press pause, we can see that already some patterns are emerging from these initial conditions. And on the sides, we can rotate the simulation. So this is a four-dimensional simulation of the game of life with the default settings. You can also simulate five or six-dimensional game of life simulations, and of course also three-dimensional. And what we are seeing is the simulation from above. So this is like an image, 2D representation of three dimensions of the simulation. Because we are three-dimensional creatures, we cannot see the fourth or fifth or sixth dimension, but here, if I press these rotation buttons, we can see a 2D representation of the fourth dimension of the simulation. This is rotation 2. If I press again, this is the visible dimension we normal creatures see, and also I can see the fourth dimension rotation 1. And these are the three representations I can see with the default settings. And for example, if I go back here, I can see that I have selected cells with 4 neighbors to get born and also cells with 10 neighbors to get born. And I can easily add another rule. So now, for example, also cells with 6 neighbors will get born. And if I press restart here, we can see that quite quickly the simulation diverges from the one we saw before. Now the patterns are completely different from what we saw before. And there are countless of different settings we can use for this simulation. We can simulate 3, 4, 5 or 6 dimensional simulations. And if we go all the way up to 5 or 6 dimensional simulation, the different possible rotations for the simulation grow exponentially. So now we can see 3 different rotations of the simulation, but we could also have something like 30 different representations of the simulation. So the amount of different variations in this kind of simulation are practically countless. Let's change something else. So this is the simulation seed. So in the beginning there are going to be 4 cells here, and these numbers tell us how many neighbors each of these cells are going to have. For example, in the center these cells have 3 neighbors, and I can also build cells above and below them. But let's for example put cells like this. So now in the center there's going to be 4 and maybe cells like this. So here there's going to be 5, and maybe I will now use cells with 5 neighbors to get born, because in the seed I see that here is 5, 5, 5, 5. So these cells will get born, for example. This one's in the center will survive. And when I press restart, we can once again see that the simulation quickly diverges from the default settings. And now different patterns are going to emerge in the simulation. And now also, if I press pause, now this is very nice pattern, for example here. I can rotate the simulation, and this is one different representation of the simulation, and this is also going on in the simulation the same time as everything else, but we just cannot see it. And this kind of thing gives rise to very complex patterns, because behind the scenes other patterns are also emerging. And these are the 3 representations of the current simulation. And in my eye, they are all pretty beautiful. Also, we can go even further back, and now these are the simulation settings. And for example, the top one here says that we are using 4 dimensions. We could also use 5 or even 6 dimensions in the simulation. And if we use more than 4 dimensions, especially 6, we can see here that the cell count explodes. Really, now we are going to have 16.5 million cells. So our device is going to have to do a lot of work to simulate these kind of things. But we can of course tone down some other settings, and then the cell count will go lower. For example, the size of the dimension 3 we can make it smaller, and then the cell count also goes smaller. And this goes also for the dimension sizes. So for example, if I put dimension 4 size to be 3, we are going to have 3 representations of the simulation hidden in the 4th dimension. And if I press the dimension 5 size to be 3, then there are going to be, logically, we can say that there are going to be 3 times all of the 3-dimensional simulation and also 3 times all these 4th dimension simulations going on behind the scenes. We can think like this because we are 3-dimensional, so this is easier for us to think about, but actually the cells are going to have more and more directions where they are counting their neighbors. But let's use 4 dimensions for now because it's faster, and I can also even tone down the resolution. This means if I use full resolution, it's going to have a cell for each pixel of your screen. So once again, the cell count is going to explode really. But with the powerful device, you can simulate even full resolution simulations. But usually even the resolution divided by 4 is enough, or even 8 is enough, because we can zoom in and out. So actually this is going to have an effect on the simulation only when the simulation expands to be really huge. So usually for testing settings, these 1x4 or 1x3 are pretty good settings. And now we have changed that our dimension 4 size is going to be 4, and let's say that the dimension 3 size is going to be 8. So we are already going to have over 4 million cells when the simulation expands. And when we go all the way back to the simulation, it starts from the beginning, and now we can see once again that the patterns emerging are completely different from before. And if I press pause once again, we can see that there are now 1, 2, 3, and 4 different representations of the simulation, because the size of our dimension 4 is now 4. And this visible dimension is also counted here, so you can easily see that there are 4 different simulation planes when you set the size of the 4th dimension to be 4. And now different patterns are going to emerge, since these cells are also going to have 3 different hidden simulation planes, which we cannot see right now but are affecting all the time the simulation. And different various patterns are going to emerge here. I press pause once again, and now I show the last setting here, and this is saved files. I can save my current settings by simply pressing save here, but also there are some default saves where we can see examples of different simulations. For example, there is base 5 4D, and this means that it's going to be a 4-dimensional simulation. And now this simulation seeds is also preset, and now the base 5 means that I have built a simulation where the neighbor count 5 is going to be important. In this example, there are cells with 5 neighbors will get born, and also 25. I can also put 1, 25 or any other setting, but this is the example I have built in the app. And when I go to the simulation, we can see once again a completely different simulation emerging. And this 5D simulation is quite nice. To me, it brings out very different patterns from what we have seen before, and this was also 5-dimensional simulation. So if I press pause, there are going to be many different rotations for this simulation. Now these are rotations in the 4th dimension, and also there are going to be rotations in the 5th dimension. Is there something? This was 4D simulation. I'm sorry, there is base 5D. I'm going to load that one to see a different simulation. I was mistaken here. Now this is a 5-dimensional simulation. And if I press pause, I can see that there is 4th dimension rotation 1, rotation 2, rotation 3, rotation 4, and now we are already in the 5th dimension. And these are going to look similar, but when we have also the 5th dimension, you can see that there are many and more rotations available for the simulation. Now we can see that completely different patterns are emerging when we are using also the fifth dimension for the simulation. And for my eye, this is very beautiful simulation when using the base 5 settings in the simulation and letting the thing simply expand. We can also change the simulation speed, and if I go all the way here, it's going to use all the power in your device to simulate this Big Bang emerging from the initial settings and seed. And we can slow down anytime we want and see that now our simulation is already quite big and to my eye also quite nice looking. Maybe this is all for the tutorial video. I'm also going to put a lot more different videos where I explain things in the simulation, but I think this covers the basics. Have fun testing the app out. I'm going to put links in the description for downloads. This is available for Android, iOS and also Windows. So whatever device you have, you should be able to test this simulation out. This is all for now and bye.